the permanent awakening happens not as a result of a state change, but as a result of a complete natural allowance for every part of your unenlightened self to be exposed. So it's almost as though the minute that you allow every imperfect human quality that you are hiding from yourself to be brought to the light, to be brought to expression, but in you could say, a healthy way, like the analogy of Shiva holding the poison in his neck, you will not notice the difference between being in an enlightened state and an unenlightened state. So what happens is you basically lose all differentiation between peace and non-peace. So people usually think that enlightenment means no more human imperfection. It means no more mistakes. It means no more... this is the craziest thing, is that if you imagine an enlightened state to be no more of something, then what you're doing is you're kind of setting a condition for the state. And what happens then is that you will naturally seek for a state. And when you seek for a state, you'll always be forever seeking for a state. So we're not looking for a state of mind. We're looking for the absence of resistance to states of mind. So this is hard to understand, because if I was to tell you that you're already in the place to be, you wouldn't believe me, because you think there's something fundamentally wrong with you. You think that there's something to fix about your mind. You think that there's a particular feeling that if you had would be better than the one you currently have. And that is what you're looking for as what you consider to be enlightenment. So what we have to come to ultimate realization is that we don't care about enlightenment. We don't care about awakening. We care about happiness. If awakening was going to make you miserable, you wouldn't be looking for it. So happiness is the thing we're looking for. But then you have to ask the question, what is happiness? Is happiness what I actually think it is? Because if happiness isn't what I think it is, and I have mistaken myself, then I will also then be looking for the wrong thing. So you have to be very clear then on what happiness actually is. So what happens is we go through a process of waking up to our true nature. This is the beginning of the spiritual process on the level that we speak of right now. So this is where Rupert, my teacher, will talk about being the halfway stage. And the Enlightenment is the halfway stage. He's right. Because the halfway stage is basically, so let's say that you're born, right? That's the beginning of this life. You're born as a body. You go through childhood, teenagehood, adulthood. You learn the ways of the world, you could say, right? You learn to develop knowledge, intellect, reason. You learn to have an experience over non-experience. You learn the world of duality. And as and in the world of duality, we separate ourselves. Through that separation, desire to come back to ourselves. In that desire to come back to ourselves, it looks like seeking happiness in the world. That's what it looks like, seeking, right? But at first it looks like material objects. Then it becomes spiritual objects. Then it becomes spiritual states. Then with the desire for spiritual states, typically the one we call enlightenment, that is the highest level of what I call the fourth octave, which is the highest level of the material realm, which is the desire for enlightenment, which is actually necessary at one stage. Then that takes us to actually having a glimpse of our true nature. So we have a glimpse of reality, we have a glimpse of ourselves, we have an awakening experience. Then this awakening experience, we mistake for being the final stage. It's an incomplete awakening. And that awakening is the first glimpse of what I call the seventh octave. The seventh octave is where we're living in the fourth octave in the world of duality. We have a taste of the absolute nature of reality, which is what creates the fifth octave. And people will seek around the fifth octave for a very long time. It's kind of like a spiritual autism. We get stuck there and we don't want to leave there. And what happens is we find ourselves clinging to seeking the seventh state in a fourth octave way, where you cannot find the seventh in a fourth octave way. The fourth octave, the realization of our true nature happens spontaneously. And we want to find that spontaneous realization again in an unspontaneous way. We want to force it to happen by doing things, finding things, seeking things. So what we find is that the first glimpse of our true nature is, you could say, the only thing we needed to have in order to then be interested in truth. Once we're interested in truth, we can start the unlearning process, which is unlearning everything in the fourth octave, unlearning everything that we learned in ignorance, which is developing the worldview that we currently have today. By the way, guys, if you haven't subscribed and you do watch the videos regularly, it would help the channel out if you did click subscribe. It won't take anything away from you because my videos are probably going to be spamming your feed anyway. So even if you're not subscribed, so it does bring the channel to more people if you do. So I'd be very grateful for that. So there comes a stage where we must stop desiring to change and leave our direct experience and come directly into our direct experience without trying to leave it, which means exploring our perceptions, exploring our thoughts, and exploring our feelings in a way that doesn't no longer want to change them in order to get rid of suffering. We're genuinely interested in them for the sake of truth. And what happens then is there comes a point where we end up naturally reconditioning our mind to not exit ourself in the most important moments. So in every moment, in every perception, on a minute-to-minute basis, second-to-second basis, if you will, there's a creation of a perception, there's a maintenance of a perception, and then there's a dissolution of a perception. And after every perception, we either go into revealment or we go into concealment. So if a perception has conditioned you to create separation, in other words, if it induces the belief in separation within you, for instance, if you look at a camera, right, the perception is seeing, you maintain the perception, then let's say someone calls your name. And after the perception comes to an end, there's a creation moment of either revealment or concealment. Either it will reveal your true nature, or it will conceal your true nature. The same with the name call. Someone calls your name. All of a sudden, the name, the sound, the vibration, it triggers the belief in separation. It makes you believe that you're a separate self, and it makes you then respond as a separate self. Now, that doesn't mean that if someone calls the Buddha's going to go and not respond because he's not responding as a separate self. It means that the Buddha isn't going to be convinced just because he's answered, Buddha, yes. The yes doesn't come from I fundamentally believe myself to be a separate temporally limited object. It means I, the one who I understand is the Buddha, is not really me, but I understand this person is referring to this body mind, and as this body mind, I will respond yes. It doesn't convince you anymore. The same as if you hear the sound of the birds. It doesn't convince you I am in the body, I am at a distance from the birds, and therefore I'm a separate self. Do you see what I mean? You recreate separation through every perception. So things like art, beauty, and your favorite music, they reveal your true nature. They don't bring you into concealment. This is why we love them. So music, dance, beauty, anything that we love is always something that reveals ourselves. So in other words, the perception of that experience doesn't conceal our true nature. So what happens is over time, less and less thoughts, feelings, and perceptions convince you that you're a limited, temporary, finite object. The less things that convince you that you're a limited, temporary, finite object, the less you're going to be walking around the world, hearing a sound, looking at a bloody thing, and then going, oh, I'm a separate self, I'm a separate self, I'm a separate self, conceal, 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 conceal. You see? You go into a repetitive concealment process. So you want to make the world a repetitive revealment process. In other words, there's a way that you can make every perception beauty. Beauty is the revealment of our true nature. It doesn't mean I see God literally, right? It means that I dissolve the separation between myself and the object. So we could say that there's a permanent state of perpetual revealment, right? And the point is that not that there's a permanent state of revealment, it's that when there is concealment, it's almost like it's noticed so vividly and so easily that it doesn't matter. You see? So we don't want to necessarily get to the place where every perception, thought, and feeling is a revelation. It's not necessary. That'll happen automatically. But it will happen automatically when there is concealment. We no longer go fall into the concealment and then carry on with our life being a separate self for the next 27,000 years or 27 minutes. You see, it's either revealment or concealment, but we clock it. I've gone into concealment, right? The clarity of noticing that is enough. You don't need to consistently have every perception reveal your true nature, because the point is your love and devotion to truth. Because you're only going to be noticing this level of concealment when you are really devoted to truth, which means that every time that you seek happiness in the world, which is what concealment is, you naturally notice it. And you ask the question, is my happiness fundamentally inside this thing I'm seeking? You realize it's not. Then the next thought is, you realize again, you revealment, you reveal your true nature to yourself. There are levels to how quick you will trace yourself back to your being, so to speak. There are levels to how efficient that process will be. Some people may go into concealment, for example, and they may actually do the activity, whatever it was. So the minute you go into concealment, it's synonymous with seeking happiness in the world. So you may go into seeking happiness and do the whole thing, right? It could take you a week. You come out of it and go, oh, I've just for the entire week been seeking happiness in this thing. But now I noticed it, right? The question will then be, where is happiness? And you might go, I'm not quite sure. Let me look on a YouTube video. Let me speak to my teacher, right? What's going on? You'll get kind of lost in it. Now, the opposite end of the spectrum is you feel a desire to do something, and you notice the desire is pulling you away. You notice the desire comes from lack. It comes from a belief that happiness exists in the world, and you clock it. And when you notice that, you go, oh, I noticed that I was about to do something in order to fulfill myself with. I noticed that I thought happiness was there, and it isn't actually there. Where is happiness then? And then you go, happiness is the nature of my mind. And then it instantly takes you out of it. Sometimes in a middle way, it might look like a contemplation. It might look like, well, am I my thoughts? Am I my feelings? And all of a sudden you move into self-inquiry. But the point is, you want to get to the point where you know where happiness is. So it takes a recognition. Then every time you go into concealment, you go into revealment after it. So the concealment becomes where you reveal. And then you start living in what I call the celebration. You live in celebration. So first we live in concealment, then we go through revealment, then we live in celebration. So consolation, revelation, celebration. That's the process. When you're living in the revealment, that's what we're living in the celebration mode. So I cover all of this in my free community, how we can kind of explore all these thoughts, feelings, and perceptions that seem to convince us we're limited, which create concealment, which then brings us back into the world of seeking. And we will do this all the time. This will keep happening until we go through that process, because there's infinite perceptions that will convince us that we're limited. So it'll constantly recreate that belief. So this process is a very important one. I have a free community. The link's in the description. I also have a residency where we go through this entire process and understand how to explore the thoughts, feelings, and perceptions that bring us into concealment so that we live in celebration. Thank you.